This is the Kaizen Way, the show dedicated entirely to continuous improvement. Join us every Thursday for new episodes on popular platforms like Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and Google Podcasts. This show is proudly sponsored by MachineTek LLC, your one-stop shop for robust training solutions for soft and even most specialized of skills. Find them on the web at modernkaizen.com and all major social media platforms. We thank you for joining us. Now, without further ado, here's your host, Mike Monroe.
What's up and good morning, everybody. Once again, it's Mike Monroe here with the Kaizen Way. We've got a great show planned for you today. I'm really excited. This person, this guest, this legend that we have is someone that when we first started the show was so high on my list of someone I wanted to have on here. So I'm really excited that today is the day that we get to hear from Javier. So Javier, good morning to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give me your name, your role, and then something unique about you so everyone else can feel as excited about your presence as I do.
Oh, good morning. Well, I hate to disappoint now that with that intro, but first and foremost, let me start off by giving you the kudos. I know you guys are early in your implementation at the Kaizen Way, and it's, I want to commend you guys. Good. I listened to the other podcasts, and hey, it's well put together, good host, and good editing. So, I'll let the man know to, Mike deserves a raise here. Woo! So I'll do my best. I'll do my best not to disappoint.
Well, you're already doing amazing. And like I said, I'm super excited to have you on here. So tell me about your role currently, and then give me something unique about you. What's something on the personal level that you think kind of defines who you are?
Okay, so, I'm the general manager for a small business veteran service disabled owned company in the aerospace industry, specifically in composites, even more so specifically in honeycomb fabrication for aluminum and non-aluminum and foam core fabrication. And we're, as mentioned, small business, less than 50 employees, and we've been in business for 30 years. And something unique about me, well, I'm passionate about sports. I listened to another podcast of yours, and you guys talked about LeBron James, and I coincidentally met LeBron James before he played his first professional game in Hawaii when they were doing the what's considered the summer league. He was about 18 then. And so I'm passionate about basketball, football, boxing, any martial arts, like to run, like to exercise outside, swim, anything outdoors. I like, I dabble a little bit in chess. I like math and lean, obviously, passionate about lean, which is, how we're meeting today. So I look forward to, this podcast.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Actually, when I was first talking to you about the Kaizen Way and bringing you on the show, you had kind of touched on how when you first learned about lean and some of the methodologies that it was just like a light went off, right? And you had mentioned before the show, that you have kind of this addictive, continuous improvement personality, right? And you learned about lean and just decided, I'm going all the way in. I'm going way down that rabbit hole. And, here you are, a general manager of a major manufacturer, small business, just some really cool things that you guys create. So talk to me a little bit about your journey and what that deciding moment was where this is the answer, this is the way.
Sure. So, it was mainly survival at first. So what I mean by that is, as you know, I was in the Marine Corps. I served till about 2009. I did some overseas contracting in Afghanistan for a few years after that. And my first introduction to the civilian life, it was in manufacturing and operations. And they were undergoing a lean implementation as well. So I started looking at some KPI boards. They started doing, the basic success stuff. And I said, okay, what is this all about? I don't know anything about this. I don't want to essentially, this is civilian world. This is different from the military. So it's, you gotta make it or else you're going to be on the unemployment line. So what I decided to do at that time is I kind of put my undergrad on pause and went to get my green belt certification. So I did that while I was working there. And it was, it was the right move to do at the time, because I was able to learn on the fly there in operations in a manufacturing facility, but also get it from the academic standpoint. And and the professor was a master black belt. Overall, it was about a year course, because you had to take a few other courses, like introduction to continuous improvement, similar to what you guys are doing. And then we essentially got introduced to green belt and then black belt as well. So it mainly started off with survival. And then, as you mentioned a little bit, once I go in on a subject that's interesting to me, I went in. So I probably that first year, if I had to guess, I read about 20 to 30 books just
Nice.
in lean continuous improvement, leadership. You referenced a few on your previous podcast, like this Toyota Way. That was one of the first books that I've read. I read The Machine That Changed the World, just all sorts of different books. The Lean Pocket Book, the Six Sigma Pocket Book. I would recommend those two books to anybody who's getting involved with lean, just because you can put them in your pocket, literally, and it's called the Pocket Book. But also, they have a lot of good information.
Beautiful.
And
it seems.
Sure. And so it's been about a decade. It's been about a decade journey. And just when you think you know everything, you don't. So I mean, it's like your show, the Kaizen Way. It's constantly adjusting, changing, and the more and more I basically studied and learned it, I realized, well, the basic definition that you'll see in most books, they'll say, to identify and remove waste to improve productivity, right? So that's usually what you'll find in some of these these books, or if you Google it right now, and you can't. But then the more I studied it, I realized it was more about people, culture, mindset, and essentially, working, bottom up. So it's been about a little bit over a decade.
Beautiful. And that mindset is something, I know, especially modern Kaizen's really decided to invest in, right? Is that you have all these statistics and there's these metrics, and ultimately a lot of that drives, the decisions that we make. But that buy-in and that mindset is really at the core of a lot of it, because, ultimately it's the human element. I can't remember
Sure.
I can't remember what company it was, but they had this whole marketing campaign about the human element at one point. And it was one of those things that really struck me. And it's something that I've always, anytime I'm looking at something complex or something mechanical in, trying to figure out, where the variations are, it's always, the human element, right?
Sure. And I'm going to steal a line from one of my former professors. He said, "No one likes change besides a wet baby," right? So, and in reality, it starts with like mindset. Before the show kicked off, we talked about gym routines. As I mentioned, usually, I've been an avid, member of a gym for probably about 20 years now. And usually the gyms get crowded right around, January. And by this time, at this point, I would say 80% of them are gone, so, and it starts with mindset, it starts with tricking your mind, saying, okay, well, how can I trick my mind to make sure that I go? So you leave your, a little bit, that I take from David Goggins, which I did myself before I even found out who he was. I always put my shoes out to remind myself, okay, I got to put those on. I would put my gym clothes like close by to remind myself I got to put it on. It's a mindset to improve. And you still lean can relate. You mentioned, of course we think of lean manufacturing, but of course you guys are doing a really great job in healthcare and in other industries, but also it pertains to your life too, as well. So you can put a standard work. Like if you walk into my place, there's whiteboards and standardized work everywhere. Say, hey, I run today, lift today, chest today, play with, date night, on Friday or Saturday, just to make sure that we stay on top of what I consider a routine.
It's a beautiful thing. Because Sean always warns too. He's like, these principles are great, but he's like, don't take these principles home to your spouse, because he always tells the story about how the husband ends up making his own breakfast because he's like, I can make the breakfast in 15 minutes if we follow these steps. And the wife was like, you know what? Go ahead and do that.
That sounds like a great idea.
No, but it's true, and I think it's important that we standardize and just to kind of harmonize with your gym analogy. There is that with all the years that I was in the Chamber of Commerce, I saw the same thing in the chamber too. January was always one of the biggest months, because all of these business owners were like, this year I'm going to get involved with community. I'm going to be the philanthropist that I see when I close my eyes. I'm going to make those steps. And sure enough, by, mid-February, early March, it was back to the same core group that were committed and really invested in the community, right? But one of the things that I've heard continuously on this show when it comes to buy-in, and I think it's really important that we draw the parallel here, is that it's keeping that that initiative in front of you, right? And continuously reminding yourself to keep that mindset, right? So like putting your shoes out or putting your gym bag out in the morning, that way it's in front of you and it's motivating you to kind of stay on that pathway, right? And I've noticed in the professional sense too, the organizations that really market the buy-in and really market the commitment to these principles tend to really improve faster, because it's something that's continuously in front of their people, which is a beautiful thing. So
yeah, and I want to make sure I put it out there. It's not easy. It's very difficult. Whether it's like we mentioned, the gym routine or any new implementation. Like I mentioned, we have an informal like success program at home. We have a standardized work. My son, whenever I hear stories here at work, or like, my child has difficulty getting ready in the morning, I said, well, build a routine for them. Make sure that he knows or she knows what time they got to wake up. What's the first step? Brush your teeth, then you make your bed, then you take a shower, leave the and just within a couple of months. At the time my son was probably 5, he's 8 now. He's been doing the same routine for 3 years, and I don't have to put a standard work in front of him anymore. It's already ingrained. But it's difficult. It's difficult here at the workplace as well.
Definitely. And it also takes time. It's one of those things that I've seen some folks that are maybe new to the initiatives that, they think it's going to be a light switch. But especially when it's changing a culture or changing, something that is deep rooted in a habit. I heard someone say one time that changing culture was like steering a cruise ship with an oar. It takes a lot of
Sure.
time and effort, right? But you can eventually turn that cruise ship around, and that's one of those metaphors I think that's always kind of resonated with me. So, so we've kind of talked a little bit more about the way that we sustain and increase that buy-in. And it's that commitment to that culture. But have you seen anything, with your time in the continuous improvement space that's kind of like your secret sauce, like something you see consistently that really helps kind of initiate and perpetuate that buy-in for whatever lean initiative that you're trying to implement?
Sure. So I think I'll speak for most humans. We're very visual, right? So we got to be able to see it to believe it, to essentially get started, whether it's, I just mentioned the gym, right? So if, that's why in advertising and, marketing, they always show, the cut guy, the big buff guy, or the gal in a bathing suit say, I took this protein powder for 6 months and this is what I look like. Oh, well, it looks like it works. So essentially for lean, same thing. So we got to make as much as possible visual to everybody and make them understand and use real life examples. So that's something that I've essentially learned to do early on is, basically bring it home to, the, home routines and, medical routines and essentially just help, post it like standard work when they say, well, explain what standard work is. I'll exactly talk about what is it you do when you wake up in the morning? What is it what you do before you go to bed? That's standard work, essentially, right? That's standard work. You have goals. Okay, so how can I meet those goals? Okay, well, on the factory floor, you have what's called hour by hours. Okay, are those, so how do you get hour by hour? How do you hit a target? Well, okay, so you draw a baseline first. You determine what the, what kind of capacity you have. You look at your demand. That's what we consider takt time in the lean world. For those of you who, want to remember that, it's TD. I learned that from one of my mentors. And essentially, it's total time divided by demand. So that's the easiest way to remember it. And it's just make it relatable to them, to the people, to your audience, and make it as visual as possible. Like I said, with TVs, with whiteboards, and once they start seeing the change, I have a quick story. And also I might add some accountability too, right? So I have a quick story at a previous employer. Really good people have been there. I think it was about 4 of us, not 5 of us. Me, that's including me. I would consider there less than 2 years. The other guys, 15, 20 plus years. And they thought, okay, well, hey, here comes this new guy, gun ho, inspired, walking at a fast pace. And they said, well, this is basically flavor of the month. By the time, within a couple of months, sustainability, they've tried this before, this is not going to work. And they weren't believers. And so I challenged them. I said, well, okay, so they basically, the previous manager, the previous supervisor before you, and then before him, it just never sustained. It doesn't work. I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. So how long have you been here? 15 years. How long have you been here? 20 years. How long have you been here? 28 years. I said, in reality, the reason why it hasn't sustained is because you guys didn't buy in. Mm-hmm. I go, you guys have been the common denominator, and if you really want it to work, you guys will, you have to believe, and I can't force them to believe. You have to figure out, okay, what they've never been involved with is with metrics. Once we started looking at metrics and they start feeling good about performing and improving, they bought in. They bought in. They realized, like, wow, well, what we do impacts, upstream. And if we fail, the entire facility fails. And once, most people don't want that pressure, but they accepted it and they saw it a different way. And they realized, wow, we're actually more important than what we thought. And so, and in this scenario, we're essentially the first process of probably 20-step process. And once they understood the impact, they were all in.
That's a beautiful thing, and I've seen that consistently, through my time with Kishan, and especially in the continuous improvement world. And I've noticed a lot too. That buy-in really comes when you lean hard on their perspective. Like we're doing a yellow belt course right now, and there's a lot of folks in the class, and you can tell that within like the first hour of the class, they're already starting to kind of think about life differently. And then similarly too, one of the things that I think is important for that buy-in is creating a safe space for people to,
sure,
really kind of express the things that they see on a daily basis. Because in that
sure.
yellow belt course, we're sitting in there, and these are all things that just happen on a daily basis, right? Or as we say, the things that are actually happening, right? And we're about an hour into the class, and you can just tell that they're starting to see where they are a part of the chain, and that their role is very important. And they just automatically, even with the general manager in the room, they just automatically, we always do you have $1,000 to fix a problem in a week. What do you do? Right. So they're all coming up and presenting, the general manager standing in the back there. He's like, yeah, we should do that right now. And these are like little things that really add up. Right. But, that reinforcement just in that one first hour there, no matter what happens for the rest of the class, everybody in that class feels validated, and their engagement is so
sure.
much more fruitful than, if they were just being kind of droned at for, a couple of hours there. So, which I've seen happens quite a bit especially the training world, but as we know,
Sure.
is a character. So,
Oh, certainly. Of course. And I'll share another quick example that actually, that happened to me that actually got me to buy in, because again, initially at the beginning of the podcast, I said it was about survival. I was, the company, the organization was, undergoing a lean implementation, and, the workforce was, tenured workforce. And for myself, I was brand new. I just landed to that, what I would consider that battlefield. So I had to essentially, figure it out. And to me, it was just, okay, I took a certification. At this point, I really haven't bought in. I started reading the books, as I mentioned, listening to all the podcasts, and coincidentally, I'm part of one now. But it was a story of a we'll just call him Bill, and that's his real name. So if you're out there, hello. But he was part of the organization for about 30 years, and so for I would say the first couple of years when you're learning, about the lean system, the lean program, the lean culture, you're piloting a bunch of stuff that you learn, right? And the courses and the curriculum that you guys are, of course, teaching today. But we were essentially just doing a pilot program on his workstation success, but also, trying to, get some efficiencies. We did a, value stream map, VSM, for those who understand that acronym. But, he kind of stopped and basically went over to my workstation. He said, "Hey, Javier, I've been here for 30 plus years." He's like, "I got to tell you, he's like, I don't think anybody's ever listened to any of my ideas before." And I was taken aback because I was just learning how this. To me, it was like, well, maybe he doesn't know that I'm testing this myself too. So I don't know what I'm doing either. So, but it was inspiring. It was inspiring and encouraging to, I think, I think this is something that I'm going to be doing in the long run, because I think, we'll talk about it towards the end of the podcast, but, a lot of veterans are, and it's so, a lot of, it also transfers over to, some law enforcement and firefighters and even athletes. So once you're done, once you retire, it's hard to find another purpose, right? So we struggle with that because we're with our teammates, our soldiers, our Marines, and we've become accustomed to challenging each other and just being in that environment. And then once you retire, you retire. That's it. So it's hard to find another purpose. And then for me, that was that moment. I mean, to essentially say, hey, I think I found something else that I can continue, inspiring myself to do for the future.
That's a beautiful thing. And I so agree with you, because, I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, like, even from an employee retention perspective, right? 30 years of going without having an idea, like, you feel like you've had an idea heard, right? Like, your contribution to the company being heard, right? That's a long time to go. And then,
Sure.
One day is that, I feel like I'm finally being heard. And then to the yellow belt course, I mean, that's exactly what happened there, is that, a lot of times there's kind of this disconnect between leadership and the folks that happen on the floor, and it's nobody's fault. It just kind of happens organically because, we work in our different pathways, right? But for the folks on the floor, with, especially in the manufacturing space, a lot of those things are kind of monotonous, and they think
Sure.
about these ideas, and then they just kind of continuously compound and are just in there. So to be able to get that out in the world and be heard, that is a great way to really get that buy-in. And then similarly too, I mean, you've just really invested in an employee too. I mean,
Sure.
Now they feel validated and, want to, maybe they're as inspired as you are to make something better, right? Because as much
Certainly.
as, we see a lot of destruction in the world, I've seen people really find happiness in creation as well, right? In creating a better process and an easier place to work, a safer place to work is something to be proud of. So
Certainly. Well said.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. And I especially love, your relation to, as you made the transition to and finding that purpose, because that's really important. And, I've done a lot of work with military folks through my years with the chamber, and that's always been, one of my biggest one of my favorite things to see is that, when folks really latch on, whether it be, in the workplace or even doing something in the community too, is kind of replacing that purpose. It's a beautiful thing. So on that note, we're going to kind of jump into the final question here. And I'm curious because I've really gleaned a couple of things from our talk today is, number one, continuous improvement lives in every aspect of your life, right? It's something that you live. It's not something that you do from 8 to 5, right?
It does.
Right. And it's that culture that you live. And then similarly too, I mean, you're extremely creative and, have this really great way of initiating buy-in. So the big question, for the Kaizen way for this season is, what's the most outrageous way or even more so the most unique way that you've implemented a continuous improvement initiative?
So I got two examples. I would say outrageous, but uncomfortable for me to implement. And then I'll go in afterwards with what possibly was outrageous because of how we implemented it. So going back to my first role, essentially was the majority of the people, the workforce there, were Spanish-speaking people. So I can speak some Spanish. I'm not very good at it, compared to probably my other friends and family members. But I realized if I wanted to really, relate and communicate this as best as I can to the workforce, to the team, to get it going, I have to get creative. So I did it in a Spanglish manner. We talked about success, and we talked about root cause analysis, Ishikawa diagrams, and pre-shift meetings, standard work. And I did it mainly in Spanish. Well, I would consider that Spanglish, but I was very uncomfortable doing it because other than, speaking at home when I was, an adolescent with my parents, I really didn't really continue it. And so I got really good, let's just say, in my first job, because the majority of people, as I mentioned, were Spanish speaking. So I essentially did what you would consider nowadays a white belt class, right? So I did I essentially did different sessions. When I essentially got certified for green belt, I started doing the training to the people on the floor. I wasn't able to give them certificates, but I was getting that knowledge from the green belt course and taking it, back to the manufacturing facility and trying to implement things in Spanish. And I'll just say I had to learn quick. And so that was pretty uncomfortable for me, but we were able to get through it. And I had some good interpreters that helped me get through it. But that was different for me. And it's, and another one, it's with another group is we were talking about process mapping. So we talked about, okay, how can I get them to understand how we could do a process map here? So let me start with, I had a few volunteers. Okay, let's start talking about process mapping of your AM routine. What do you do before you go to work? And, of course, the obvious ones were wake up, shut the alarm off, brush my teeth, make coffee. But some people started describing a little bit further, too much detail of how they got ready in the morning that involved clothing and, exposing probably a little bit too much. So that was pretty funny, but it made everybody, obviously comfortable now. And so people okay, so I get it now. So we can use this. Okay, so how can I relate that to here? Once we had at least 3 or 4 examples of process mapping, they literally went up to the board and started, do yellow stickies saying, okay, I do this, I do that, I do that. And, it was funny because people, basically say, oh, hey, you start talking about details of removing this piece of clothing and that piece of clothing. I said, no, hold on.
Wait. We don't need to... Someone drop a beat.
Yeah. So we don't need to know all that now. But like I said, it made them really comfortable after all, everyone essentially started laughing and okay, but it helped people understand and said, oh, okay, so this is what we need to do here. Oh, okay. So this is, all right. So now we can get to the process mapping of what we do here, now that we understand.
That's a beautiful thing. And I've seen it time and time again. And I don't know if, a lot of folks have had they felt like it was a trick question at one point, right? So it's like, tell me the steps to, whatever process it is. And then, they go so into detail. And I'm super guilty of this myself. I remember the first time I was doing like some white belt stuff with Kashan, he was asking me. So I'm like, he was asking about how would you make an espresso, right? So I'm like, as deep into the details and the steps as possible. And he's like, no. The what's it called? The important few, right? So
Right.
now I understand, how to better map processes. But I mean, when you first look at it, and you really want to hunker down on those times. But ultimately, when it comes to standardization of work, I mean, it's something that needs to be implemented. So it also needs to be understood easily, right? So it cracks me up. I've seen that time and time again where people just like, I'm going to get way too far into the details, but it accidentally acts as like an icebreaker sometimes too. In the sense that, now everybody's laughing. It's like, whoa, TMI, and the vibe of the class has really changed from that like instructor to, more of a family kind of working together to continuously improve. It's a beautiful thing. So,
and that's essentially what it was. It became an icebreaker. And once, like I said, everyone started laughing, they felt comfortable with, okay, next up, like at first, whenever, it's pretty regular. You ask for volunteers, maybe one or two hands. Once we got over the icebreaker, then a bunch of hands say, "Oh, I'll go next. And that's essentially, and it worked. It worked.
It does. I've seen it time and time again, and just that engagement, from those little things that we do in the very beginning to kind of taking the steps into the really hard processes, and really starting to break down statistical data and looking at cycle times and things of that nature. When we draw the parallels there to the way that, when we drop the parallels to our daily routines, it's a lot easier to digest and ultimately, kind of wrap your mind around it. Because that's what it is. I mean, whether it's at work or at home, the true buy-in happens when you really start to build the bridges between, that methodology, right? And I always, at least something that I take that really kind of gives me confidence in this is that, we only get so much life, right? So when you're standardizing work at home, or when you're, implementing routines, you're blocking things out, which means that you can quantify and specifically, have the time that you want to do the things that you want, right? So you can really maximize life if you map it out the right way, right? You don't waste any second, because I mean, every second's a gift. So I mean, why waste it, right? Let's really make it fluid and efficient. So that's always been kind of like, when Kashan and I were first talking about doing this show, that was the big thing for me. I was like, let's really kind of talk about how we can, spread this into our lifestyles, because it's something that you have to live. You definitely do. And, every day we
you guys are
improve.
Yeah, let me just say, you guys are on the right path. So it's again, it's an honor to be here, of course, and hey, continue the grind, because you guys are definitely doing the right thing, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Hey, right back at you. I mean, I know you guys have been big supporters of Modern Kaizen for a long time, and we're eternally grateful. So that is a perfect segue into the promo piece of the show here. Every show, I give our guests a chance to just kind of talk about something that's passionate, that they are passionate about, whether it's like a webinar that they have coming up, or it's hiring veterans. There's a lot of great things to be passionate about, outside of continuous improvement. So Javier, what would you like to promote today?
Sure. So I have no self-promotion, but I will promote the organization that I'm part of. As I mentioned, it's a small business, veteran-owned, service-disabled organization in the aerospace industry. And speaking of veterans, we're very passionate. The owner himself is of course, a veteran himself. So we look for, hiring veterans, and in the San Diego area. We're in the composite industry, specifically, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, precision honeycomb fabrication for aluminum, non-aluminum, and foam core processing. We have a great customer base, such as SpaceX, Northrop Grumman, Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin, Sikorsky, Bell Helicopters. So it's a very it's a easy industry and organization to work for, because of what we do, who we serve. And the other piece of it is just trying to build a good foundation, strong family, where I would say still in our lean and development here early on, a couple years in, and it's amazing to see here because it's a smaller group. So as to use a metaphor, it's a little easier and quicker to steer the ship with a smaller crew, and it's a beautiful thing. So that's pretty much it. So I appreciate again having me on, and look forward to your further shows, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you guys soon and see you guys.
Oh, definitely. In fact, just to harmonize with the plug for MachineTek there, every time I walk in there, it is absolutely apparent that they have just a wonderful culture. And it feels like everyone is very involved. So, kudos to the leadership team there and the culture that you guys have created. And really, I mean, just everything about where you guys are. I mean, just that entire area with all the cool little aerospace and the airport there.
Sure.
And then,
Right.
see out to the ocean. I mean, you're just in a really cool spot. So I'd imagine both the culture that you've created as well as the environment that you've created it in, all kind of add up to that really cool place to work. So I really appreciate that, and I've seen it firsthand there. So on that, once again, Javier, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show. Like I said, I've been really excited about having you on the show here, and you did not disappoint. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
anytime. And we'll have a second season where we will be looking at some other questions and stuff. And I just really appreciate your candor and your perspective. So expect to be back on the show sometime in the future there. So with that,
thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for having me. And sorry,
No.
Speaking of plugs, so you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and other social media. I'm not too savvy on social media, but all social media platforms out there. MachineTek LLC.
Beautiful. And that was actually my next thing was how do we connect with you? What's the best way to connect with you? Is LinkedIn the best way? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen you pretty active on LinkedIn. Is that a good way to connect with you specifically?
Certainly. So LinkedIn or www.machinetek.com.
Beautiful. Love it. All right. So I want to thank everybody once again for listening to us today and joining us for the show. Once again, a huge thank you to Javier for joining us, and MachineTek for lending him to us for 30 minutes here. I had a ton of fun. So I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.